I realized when I was 9 years old as a kid that nutrition played a great part in diseases that even doctors didn't know what to deal with. And that's how this all started. I had facial tics, little cramps in my face, and I'd squeak like a pig and make funny little noises. And it got worse and worse and worse by the time I was 9 years old. It was truly disabled. And my mother took me to, quote, the best doctor. And she said, I can't find anything wrong with him. So the next day in school, everybody else went to lunch. I went to the library and I found a nursing book. So I just started in the index under A's and went through it. And it said it's a calcium deficiency. I had chores on the farm, including feeding some alfalfa pellets that were enriched to little bull calves. And I would read the little analysis tags on the back. And it had minerals, including calcium. And ran right to the barn and began to eat handfuls of these little alfalfa pellets myself. In 2 weeks' time, I was cured. And so when I was 9 years old, I knew there was something to nutrition. When I graduated high school, I went to the University of Missouri. I got accepted into veterinary school first try. And by 1961, I was doing graduate work in pathology, doing autopsies on animals, going for a PhD in pathology.
He also studied comparative pathology, which meant comparing humans and animals and the pathology that they either shared or didn't share. And back then it was almost unheard of to be able to research back and forth between humans and animals and the things that they did share in terms of environmental impact, pollution, diseases.
And in 1961, I ran into the first recognized mass die-off in pollution in America. I'm only 21 years old, I'm a graduate student. I recognized it, did all the chemistries, got it prepared for publication, and got it published. I gave Marlon Perkins, the old Mutual Omaha Wild Kingdom show, a copy of it. Because I had worked for him. He was a good friend and a mentor.
Marlon Perkins was, at that time, the zoo director of the St. Louis Zoo, and he mentored my father and helped him get into veterinary school.
Because of his pathology and his veterinarian, he had a different way of looking at challenges that the average person didn't.
That whole chronicle of education is very, very important to understand, because once you understand that, then you understand why he talks about what he talks about.
I need you to go to Africa in the White Rhino Conservation Project. And the African Elephant Conservation Project, I don't know how long it's going to take. They're rapidly disappearing because land was being gobbled up for farming and ranching, and they require a lot of land for food. I went to South Africa on that project at the Shlushlui and Umfolozi Game Reserve. Now, you have to figure out how to tranquilize these things. Put the darts together, and we kind of crawled through the grass. I had to be within 10 yards to these 6,500-pound rhino that want to kill you. And so I figured if I shot him in the rump, I could get him to run away, as opposed to shooting him in the front, then they charge it. I spent 2 years on that project, caught over 200 white rhino, about 50 black rhino, and over 100 African elephants. So if you see a white rhino in a zoo or a wild animal park, it's either one that I caught or offsprings of one I caught. Today there's 10,000 white rhino in the world, as opposed to 400 than there was back in 1965. I'm so very proud to have been in on saving the species. This was my middle daughter, who was born in Africa. I delivered her out in the bush of Africa, and this is a white rhino pelvis that she was kind of sitting in just for something to think was kind of cute and laugh at. Catching rhino, catching elephant, living off of the wild game and fishing in Africa. It was just really a great life for a young fellow. I was prepared to stay there forever at that point. The heck with academics. Perkins sends me another letter and says, I've got a big grant from the National Institutes of Health to study pollution as a cause of birth defects and degenerative diseases, and you wrote the first paper on a mass die-off in America from pollution. The big zoos in the United States were going to use the zoos as the canary in the mine, because there's bound to be a species at the zoo that's sensitive to pollution, like humans. And you'll do pathology and autopsies on humans as well as the animals. So I went back to Washington University in St. Louis. This was called the Center for the Biology of Natural Systems. It was the St. Louis Zoo in 1967. It was a 10-year project, did 20,000 autopsies, 17,000 some change of over 454 species of zoo animals and 3,000 human beings. It turns out the pollution has nothing to do with causes. All deaths from natural causes are caused by nutritional deficiencies, but nobody had done 454 species until my project. What I found was that every vertebrate, whether you're a hummingbird or a flamingo, or you're a turtle or a fish or an elephant, a rat, a dog, cat, pig, or a human being, all vertebrates require the same nutrients. 60 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 amino acids, 3 fatty acids. If they're deficient in the same nutrient, all vertebrates get the same deficiency disease. Nobody ever thought of that before. And that was the beginning of the science we now call epigenetics, before there was the word. These 20,000 autopsies and all these chemistries and slides went into a 1,200-page book that sold for $140 back then. It had never been a book like it before. The disease of exotic animals, of course, is one of my great treasures because it represented the 10 years of actual work. It was in the Smithsonian Institute as a national treasure.
Back then, zoos did not have full-time zoo veterinarians, and so my father trained the first full-time zoo veterinarian at the St. Louis Zoo, Dr. Bover, who my father and Dr. Bover later wrote the book Diseases of Exotic Animals together. And my father's whole idea was to create an information clearinghouse.
That was the very first book ever written to be shared by zoos and vets all over the country. This is before computers. This is before the web.
But I moved to Chicago and worked as a pathologist at the Brookfield Zoo and the Lincoln Park Zoo, the Shedd Aquarium. Moved from there to the Jacksonville Zoo and the Memphis Zoos as a pathologist.
My father's impact in terms of helping animals and his passion around zoos was expanding on the idea of open-air zoos. In the early 1900s into the mid-1900s, zoos were really places that had cages and caged animals. My father's work and impact had a lot to do with creating these open-air zoos, which you see today. A great example of that is the San Diego Wild Animal Park, where the animals roam free and where the animals didn't know they were actually caged. Growing up with my father obviously was interesting. You know, as a young boy, we would move from city to city and initially zoo to zoo. I kind of thought it was normal. I thought everybody grew up in zoos. You know, I kind of had free reign and free run, a variety of zoos. I knew everybody knew me. I was, this young little kid, Dr. Wallach's son. And so it was fun growing up, around the zoos.
I was approached to go to Atlanta, Georgia and work at the Yerkes Primate Center with the primate colony there that NASA was working with to send monkeys into space and so forth.
Marlon Perkins put my father on this path early on. That's ultimately what led to my father making the discovery many, many years later of cystic fibrosis, working as an assistant pathologist at the Yerkes Primate Center, doing research on primates in particular to further human science and human health. And ultimately, that's what changed my father's direction really towards human health.
There was always that piece behind me looking for more information. Yerkes had many, many things. There's 5 of these regional primate centers scattered around the United States. In this particular one in Atlanta, Georgia, the Yerkes Regional Primate Center was being used to train and raise monkeys for NASA, for space travel. And again, it was my first year there. It was wintertime. All the people who'd been there for 15, 20 years left for the holidays. I'm the new guy on the block. I get left there by myself. Here it comes. I get a 6-month-old baby monkey. Came from a colony of 25 baby monkeys, all with different mothers and fathers, so they're not genetically related whatsoever. For 6 years, before that monkey died, every month, the parents, the mother and father of each of these baby monkeys, they would take a blood sample and put it in the freezer. So I had 6 years worth of monthly blood samples from the parents of these 25 monkeys. I mean, how perfect is that? Did everything, found the one nutrient that was missing. Hadn't been missing in the other ones before this group, but after this group, that nutrient was missing. That's why these monkeys got cystic fibrosis. It's the first non-human case of cystic fibrosis ever diagnosed in a primate, or any animal for that matter. I mean, I was excited because this is really going to help us with research to help kids with cystic fibrosis. So I had this paper all ready to go, had all the data. I had all my microscopic pictures. I had all the chemistries that I'd done, all those saved blood samples. I had the biopsies from the 24 living ones. I got it all prepared. I'm so excited. I took it to the head of the Yerkes Primate Center, and then I took it to the head of the medical school at the Emory University there. I said, I'm ready for publication here. I want you to review everything. And they fired me. Because they said, oh, it's a fall series.
When my father discovered this case of cystic fibrosis, anything to do with animal research was a hot potato, and anything to do with primate research was an extra, hot potato. And my father's discovery and belief back then, which is the same today, is that what led to the death of that infant monkey and led to cystic fibrosis occurring in that monkey was a nutritional deficiency. They didn't know what they didn't know, and they were feeding them a traditional diet of monkey biscuits and saturated oils and things like that. And my father's point was that the monkey in question and others were deficient in key nutrients, selenium being one of them, vitamin E and riboflavin being others. Information is power. He wanted the world to know this information. They wanted to keep that quiet, and so, or it seemed. My father was willing to tell anybody. He was driving the media attention to get this message out, to get the story out, to get the information out.
Wallach claims he discovered cystic fibrosis in the organs of a dead monkey while working 2 years ago here at the Yerkes Primate Research Center in Atlanta.
Proper selenium levels in her diet, we can, if we're correct, then we'll be able to prevent what is called cystic fibrosis.
So is he a radical rebel with a cause? Without a doubt, and he's the best one at it.
Dr. Wallach has really put himself in a position to take on a lot of arrows. He wasn't worried about popularity. He wasn't worried about what other people thought. What he was most concerned about is how he could impact people and do the right thing and just simply tell the truth.